What's up, everybody? It's Charles. So this question came in from Andre about the difference between OEM parts and aftermarket parts. The parts that are made by the same company, are they the same? Are they better? Are just straight aftermarket parts better? What about things like suspension components where maybe the aftermarket is considerably better? Which brands are the best? When do I save money on aftermarket parts? When do I pony up for the OEM or original equipment manufacturer? So, Andre, great question, and I actually sent this over to Paul from ShopDAP. Paul has way more parts experience than I do. Before we jump to Paul, I'm going to give you some quick things that I think are really important when it comes to the parts world. So when it comes to OE versus aftermarket, a lot of them are made by the exact same company. Oftentimes, the aftermarket one maybe doesn't have the brand badge on it, so they won't put the VW Audi logo on it. Same part, comes in the same box. Sometimes they have the VW Audi logo on it. Awesome quality, no difference other than you're not paying dealership markup. Awesome. Then there are the parts that are the made in China stuff, which may be okay, maybe not. That really depends on the part. One thing you got to consider is how vital is this part? Is this a connecting rod bolt that if it fails, you're buying an engine? Probably not going to want to do it. Is this a bumper trim that if it falls off, it sucks, but you can always get another one and it's just a minor inconvenience? Okay, not a big deal. So the sensitivity of the part plays a big role in this. Electronic parts also sometimes have issues where they won't talk right or they don't read correctly. I've seen that a number of times too. Axles are another one where B5.5 Passats never had an aftermarket axle fit. Only the OE ones have ever fit right for me. Then there's performance side of it, okay? So totally different world. Of course, H&R springs are going to be great. iBox springs are going to be great. We're moving to a different world now. We're not replacing like for like. We're modifying our car. In that case, the aftermarket is the solution. The big area I see problems with aftermarket, though, is body panels. Fitment's usually not great. Integrity, the structural integrity is not great. They're not maybe as thick as they are from the factory. So some things to consider when thinking about OE versus aftermarket parts. But I'm going to let Paul do the rest of the explaining because he's way, way, way more experienced in this world than I am. And let's see what he's got to say about it.
Okay, thanks, Charles, for throwing me this question. Andre, this is a good question, and I completely understand where you're coming from. And this is going to be maybe insightful in some ways and maybe dissatisfying as far as an answer in others. When it comes to parts for vehicles, it's very complicated and very quickly gets complicated, and the deeper you go, the more complicated it gets. So essentially the idea of is an OEM part equivalent to an aftermarket one? If you're referring to a manufacturer part, let's say, for example, an oxygen sensor, for pretty much any VW and Audi, most oxygen sensors are made by Bosch. When Bosch makes an oxygen sensor, if you're buying a Bosch oxygen sensor, it's very likely you're buying almost the exact same product and very likely to be the same product. There are some circumstances where that may not be completely true, but as a general rule, that's it. Same goes for manufacturers like Pierburg. We offer stuff like NGK, Bosch, Pierburg, and there are a multitude of other manufacturers that fall within that same spectrum, where those parts that you buy are basically identical minus the logo as to what you're buying. When you go down the road of a lot of other things, when you mentioned suspension parts and a lot of other things in repair parts in general, there are tons of aftermarket stuff that is wide-ranging in quality. Aftermarket stuff, it doesn't really have a standard that it has to meet. It just has to meet the standard of fitting in the vehicle and working, at least initially. And even that, oftentimes with some aftermarket brands, are often going to be failure prone. And to name a specific brand would be tough because there's so many brands out there. To name specific brands of aftermarket ones is always going to be challenging. And there's another thing that's happened over the past that is likely to continue in the future, which is why I'm a little bit apprehensive to say much about anything, is that oftentimes what has happened is with the pressure of profitability of some brands, once they have established a quality, they'll export more and more of their product line to try and drive down costs to, let's say, for example, China. Maybe it was manufactured in Germany. then they change it to China to drive down costs, maximize profitability, and be competitive. And then quality suffers. I've seen that happen with a specific suspension components brand over the years. I think they're trying to dial it back a little bit. There are also other manufacturers that offer maybe multi-levels of products. Like even Volkswagen actually offers a economy brand parts, which are a lower quality version. I don't really talk much about it because I think it's pretty confusing in general, and how to explain to somebody, here's an economy part, how long is this supposed to last, is really going to be a question that 99% of people are going to ask, and no one really has an answer. It's just a lower quality product, but it is still a factory product. So with that said, I think the main question is, should you use them? And I think that's really what most people, when they run into this question, is forget about are they good or are they bad. Will they last longer? I can tell you that's almost certain that no aftermarket part is going to last longer than an OEM part. Again, there will be exceptions, but when those exceptions are true, it's because somebody developed something intended to replace, let's say, a failure-prone product. And when that's the case, it's likely to be more expensive than the factory product, not cheaper. So if it's cheaper than a factory part, it's almost certain that it's not going to last longer than what a factory part is. And oftentimes, a lot of aftermarket stuff just doesn't have the same fit and finish, which means sometimes you need to modify a little bit to get it in, or you need to grind off this piece that's sticking out. And that, again, that varies by brand. Usually that's only going to be on the lowest tier of quality of aftermarket stuff, but it can be a problem. So moving into, should you put them on your vehicle? So it really depends on a lot of factors as to whether you should put aftermarket parts on your vehicle. And from everything from, like, for example, budget. If you can't afford the factory part, it's irrelevant whether you feel like it's the right choice or not, because you just can't afford to buy it. And I completely understand where you're coming from and why you might make that choice. For me, I always recommend either the factory or, again, a factory equivalent like Bosch or Pierburger or one of those manufacturers, because essentially you're getting the same product as what you would get from the factory. And while some people say on a car that it already failed on, that it's probably not that good anyway, it probably had significantly more R&D into it than a lot of the aftermarket stuff that you're going to find, the cheap stuff. So to say that stuff is not is a one-to-one equivalent, it's not a fair comparison. And for example, we have actually, funny enough, we have a company, name of our business, Deutsche Auto Parts. There's a company on eBay who sells parts there, Deutsche Parts USA. They sell a lot of aftermarket stuff, and we sometimes get confused with them because they sell suspension components that I've seen people talk about, and we get calls every now and again because they don't have a phone number that's public, that people have parts fail after 2-3 months of a ball joint or a control arm or something like that. And that seems to be a pretty common theme with them. And so again, when you go down that road, having that aftermarket part probably didn't save you a lot of money if it fails 2 or 3 months down the road. Hopefully in that circumstance you'd be able to get taken care of. But if the company's not reputable, you're going to be past any time frame to be able to file a dispute against them, and so basically you're stuck buying another one. So I always hate to see people buy stuff twice. Part of the reason why we as a company only offer generally higher quality stuff is because I don't want to leave our customers with that experience. And I'm fully aware as a business that we actually lose business opportunity by only offering those tiers, because we don't offer a more competitive price point for what people are looking for. And the other thing, another factor in the whole thing, other than just budget, is how long you're going to keep the vehicle. If you're just trying to fix the car to get you down the road, and then 6 months, a year down the road you're planning to dump it, maybe you get the aftermarket one, save as much as possible. If you're keeping it long term, I would try to keep high quality parts in the vehicle, because you don't want the headache down the road and the frustration of either repairing it or paying somebody, even worse, to repair a part that was a low quality part to begin with. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on the subject of that. And one thing I want to touch on real quickly is a lot of companies actually offer multiple tiers that people don't know about. Like, for example, Michelin. Michelin, I would consider to be one of the premier brands as far as tires. But if you go to places like Costco, they have a tire that they call, I think it's called a Club club category or something like that, where essentially they make a tire specifically for these big box stores to sell, which is it has a Michelin brand on it, but it's nowhere near the average quality of what their standard tire is. So it's much cheaper, but it's nowhere near the same quality as what their other stuff is. Cheaper isn't always going to be a lower quality product, but oftentimes it would be, again, except for the case where, for example, you're buying a factory pump that has a VW logo on it made by Pierberg, or a factory pump made by VDO, without the logo versus the one with the logo. The one with the logo, VW logo, is going to be much more expensive than the one without the logo. And so going with the equivalent VDO pump, which is essentially the same part, is definitely not a bad choice. And I would never, ever tell anybody to shy away from that.
All right, so thank you, Paul, for dropping some mad parts truth. Hope that answered your question. There's a million different variables on whether you should buy the OE part or whether you should buy the aftermarket part. It really all depends. Again, I'd sort of use the sensitivity barometer. How vital, how sensitive is this part? The more vital, the more sensitive. Even though it's going to be more money, the more likely I am to err on the OEM side. That being said, the aftermarket also does a really good job of updating parts and making improvements to revisions to make a better quality part. So this question isn't simply answered one versus the other. It all comes down to the individual part and whether the aftermarket's mastered reproducing it, mastered making another one like the Eurowise VR6 thermostat housing, which is way better than the factory one, so or the crack pipe, the metal crack pipe. So really think deeply about the one single part, analyze what it does, analyze what it happens if it fails, and see if that's worth the cost saving. So great question, man. Guys, keep the questions coming. Don't forget, check out Paul over at ShopDAP, vital dude in the VW Audi community. They also make great videos. We need to get together and collab more, Paul. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, follow me on the social channels. Leave a comment if you have one down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.